Infinity Bros podcast, the only podcast that's perfectly balanced as all things should be. I am your host, Max Mosier, here. Grateful to have you on episode 93, wherever you're listening, however you're listening. Thanks for making us part of your podcast experience. Today, we are talking about Eternals, the newest MCU movie coming out with a slew of cast and characters. I'll talk about them later. But before we get into that, we want to make sure you're familiar with our characters. As I said before, I'm Max, and with me today is Infinity Bro Mark. Mark, welcome back.
Hey, I am just eternally grateful that I made it back home.
Now, before we introduce our next guest, Mark, tell the audience what you mean by that. That's a great plug. If we were going to commercial break, that would be a great plug.
Buckle up, Infinity Bros universe. On my way back from, I had to drive 33 minutes to the closest theater that had Eternals. Luckily, find out they have recliner seats, so like bonus, blah blah blah. Movie's done, driving back home. I get about 4 minutes away from the next small town that I'll have to go through before I get home, and middle country, pitch black. I just happen to look up, and I see this like what looks like it's a comet, but I realize it's kind of moving too fast, and it's not coming towards the Earth or like at a more of a rounded path, and it kind of like it's like this bluish or green white color. It has like this streak, and that's why I thought it was a comet. But then it starts slowing down, and then just speeding up again. It's still pretty fast when I say even slowing down. And then it's just gone. It looked like it went in like hyperspace and just was out of the view.
So
in a straight line.
Okay. So did you become a Green Lantern today?
I wish I could have. I wish that was what I could confirm. I wish I was like, I have, blackest day, brightest day, whatever. I probably would have been given the red ring because that's what I would be destined to be. But yeah, I wish I was a lantern right now. But I'm a lot better than the 4 seconds of possibly seeing a UAP or UFO or whatever. But
and then you hit a deer.
And then I hit a deer, and again, had premonitions or 3 dreams this week thinking about hitting a deer, and I've had the privilege not hitting a deer out of 30 years of my life, and I hit like an 8-point buck. And I'm glad I drove my bigger car today and not the small Impala, because who knows? This would just be a podcast with Max and our guest, LJ.
That would have been fine. That would have been okay. But we're just glad you made it here safe, Mark, to record today. And we're thankful that even though you didn't get the Green Lantern ring, that you're still here able to be part of the Infinity Bros Universe podcast of Eternals. But as you talked about, Mark, we have a special guest today from Geeks Under Grace. He's a dear friend of the podcast, a listener, and we've acquiesced with him in a couple other settings. I did a podcast with him a year ago on another what was the podcast we did? LJ, whatever. LJ will tell us that. But LJ Lowry, LJ, how you doing?
Doing great. Glad to be on here. It was Nerd of Godcast. We did a big podcast roundtable, and it was awesome.
Yeah, but Scott Higo was on it, so like for us here, that was like, would we call it a big round table? We'd call it a table with Scott at it. And what the heck are you doing here, Scott? So there you go. LJ, how you been, man?
Been good. I think last time I talked to you, like I'm pretty sure it was like earlier in the year. I don't even know if COVID was a thing yet or not, or at least it was still fresh. It's been a while, but yeah, been good. Just doing the usual, writing reviews, streaming, podcasting. That's kind of what I do other than my normal day job. So that's just kind of what I've been up to as we've been navigating these last crazy couple of years. So,
dude, that sounds like us too. Like we work, but like we would prefer to be streaming and podcasting all the time.
If I could get paid, would I get paid for my real job?
To do this?
Streaming and podcasting?
I do it every day.
You would see my face everywhere.
Well, so LJ is going to be here. He's a dear friend. We're so pumped you're here, LJ. Hey, if you like LJ today, do me a huge favor. On the show notes, you're going to see a link to geeksundergrace.com. Check this website out. It looks great. And I'm not trying to be playing favorites, but the very first article is a Kingdom Hearts article.
Yes.
So I
That-
think that's worth it for our audience. And the collective eye roll you just heard from our audience, we're gonna ignore it. But I just want you to know that as it's November 5th, there has been a Kingdom Hearts article posted, and I've read maybe a couple paragraphs of it already. So you'll want to make sure you check this out. Click the link in our show notes. You can also follow him on Twitter. Go give him a follow. He's a great follow. And Geeks Under Grace, our dear friends of the Infinity Bros podcast. But you did not come here for that. You came here for the Eternals spoiler review. We are going to spoil this movie today. We're going to rate it, talk about it, dissect it up and down. Mark just ran through a deer, ran through UFO sightings to get to this episode of our podcast to tell you about it. So I'm going to make sure that we put the link. Forgive me. I'm going to put the rating of how we do things and how we rate things on this show right here.
Here on the Infinity Bros podcast, everything is ranked from a 0 to 6 point scale. 0 meaning horrible, and 6 meaning absolutely excellent. If all of the Infinity Bros rank something a 6, it gets an Infinity Step.
I said rating, but it's rating system. Words are hard. Also, I'm going to go ahead and put the spoiler review right here. If you haven't seen Eternals, from this point on, we're 6 minutes in, but from this point on, we want you to know that you're going to only hear spoilers for this movie. So if you have no intent of being spoiled for Eternals, stop listening, come
That's
back
too damn
later,
bad.
stop listening, and we're going to do a quick review on the front end. But I think with this one in particular, typically what we've done in the past for our typical listeners is we'll do a non-spoiler review. I think with this one, it just does require some discussion on some things that occur. So we're not going to provide that this episode. So from this point on, this is just spoiler.
This is
Prepare yourself.
an Infinity Bros
Prepare yourself.
spoiler warning.
Eternals is the newest MCU movie. It's the synopsis reads, "It is the saga of the Eternals, a race of immortal beings who lived on Earth and shaped its history and civilizations." It was written and directed by Chloe Zhao, written by Patrick Burleigh and Ryan Firpo. It stars a slew of characters. Gemma Chan returns. For those that some of you may know, she was in Captain Marvel. She had a kind of minor role in that. She actually thought she wasn't going to be able to come back, and then Kevin Feige actually approached her about the role of Cersei. Richard Madden plays Icarus. Angelina Jolie plays Thena. Salma Hayek plays Ajak. Camille Nanjiani plays Kingo. Kit Harington plays Dane Whitman, aka the Black Knight. Leah McHugh plays Sprite. Brian Tyree Henry plays Fastos. Barry Cogan plays Druig. Lauren Ridloff plays Makari. Lauren Ridloff, the first official deaf MCU superhero. LJ and Mark, can you remember another deaf superhero in another franchise? Like, I don't think I can think of one.
No, I can't. I think I can think of deaf actors and actresses in other movies recently, but not like any superhero stuff at all, really.
I almost said Daredevil, but he's blind.
I thought Daredevil too. That's funny. Bill Skarsgård actually plays Crow. Bill Skarsgård, many would know. Mark, obviously, the movie's It. He plays what's the clown's name in that?
Pennywise.
Pennywise, thank you. Has Steelman plays Ben, Fastos' husband, and since we've already spoiled it on the front end, Harry Styles plays Eros. I want to pause real quick on this. So for those that don't know, I do a youth ministry called Young Life. And on Monday night, I'm sitting in a living room with 40 kids. And no lie, LJ and Mark, there's a girl that looks at everybody and goes, "Did you hear that Harry Styles is going to play Eros in the new Eternals movie?"
/ Star Fox.
Right, but she said Eros. Like, Harry Styles is so popular in pop culture.
He's so hot
that
right
now. Well, the episode's ruined, Mark. Thanks. Hope you're happy.
Always
We're
was.
9 minutes in and you ruined it. Hope you're happy. No, I couldn't believe that this girl spoiled it, and she loved Harry Styles so much that she had to drop that Eros was in the post-credit scene. I just thought that was bananas. I just had to pause.
Yeah,
and
because she may not realize how like that's a big deal to a different crowd, while it's the actor for her. Yeah.
exactly. And like, I don't think I've ever seen something more spoiled on Twitter and Reddit more than Harry Styles. This was like, I mean, I knew about this weeks ago. I knew about this before this girl said this, but this was just like, for whatever reason, the Harry Styles crowd is really into him. And this was everywhere. People were very excited about this. So he does play the brother of Thanos, if you got to this point. And then Pip is played by Patton Oswalt. And there's a brief, LJ, I told you this, but Mark, this will be news to you potentially. There's a brief question to Dean Whitman at the end from a character off screen we don't see. Chloe
Blade.
Zhao did confirm today that was Mahershala Ali playing Blade. That was Blade. So
That's great.
Which I think is fantastic. I don't understand why they didn't just show him.
All right, so to come back to Patton Oswalt, do we get a multiverse meeting of Pip and the MODOK from Hulu?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all.
1,000%. You're welcome. Boom. I have gifted you this.
Thank you.
I also forgot to say Mangdong Suk plays Gilgamesh and Harish Patel plays Karun. Forgive me, I forgot to say those guys as well. So we're first gonna let me get into a little trivia real quick, and then we will talk about our ratings real quick. There's a couple things I want to make sure I talk about. The cast and crew were evacuated from the Canary Islands in November 2019 due to the discovery of some bomb remnants from a military shooting range near set. Apparently, Richard Madden and Angelina Jolie were present on set and evacuated that day. I talked about Gemma Chan on the front end. According to Camille Nanjiani, Chloe Zhao used practical effects for the film and did very little green screen, which to me, that was very obvious watching this. All right, so now we're going to talk about our non-spoiler reviews of this movie. For those that listened last episode of our podcast, you heard that I was going on Wednesday. So I went on Wednesday, LJ went on Thursday, and then Mark brought up the rear. We're recording November 5th.
Right where I like to be.
Mark. So Mark
Robbie
brought up
and
the
Scott
rear.
Higa both laughed at that. So
Scott Higa just busted a gut for sure. That guy's a pastor. Oh man. And so Mark just got out fresh out of it. I've had a couple days to sit on it, and LJ is on it. So LJ, you are our guest. Why don't you go ahead and give us your brief broad stroke review? You can talk about spoilers if you'd like, and give us a rating.
Cool. I did have some issues with it. I enjoyed it, but I feel like it would have been even better if it wasn't attached to Marvel. Like, I feel like it could have been a really cool movie on its own. And I mean, there was still a lot I did like. There was also some pacing issues, I think, and then there was some weird. There was a couple scenes in there that just felt kind of random to me. Like they just kind of happened all of a sudden. So I am going to give it a 4 out of 6.
4 out of 6. Okay.
mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go next, Mark. I'm gonna let you bring up the rear, and because I want to wait a little longer to hear what you think. I got to see this on Wednesday, as I talked about earlier, and going into it. So last episode of our podcast, one thing I said was I am worried about the Rotten Tomatoes score. If you have listened to this podcast before, you know that I am a believer in the Rotten Tomatoes system. I think it's a good system. I think it helps measure critics and their feedback and really gives you a great score that can really help you and assist you on fringe movies and choosing what you want. There's obviously specific movies from my perspective that I'm going to go see regardless of the score. This is clearly one of them. But for me, that's just a good system that I like to use. And I was nervous when I heard that Eternals, which today, as of November 5th, is at a 49% on Rotten Tomatoes with 285 reviews, was such a rotten score. And obviously, it's the first rotten Marvel movie ever. That's the last piece of trivia we can also say. But personally, I'm happy to report that I think this is a great movie. I actually don't understand the negative feedback. So LJ, I'm interested to hear just your perspective. A 4 is still a good score, but I'm interested to hear the things that struggled for you. I do concede that this was a slow movie in the middle. I think that was going to happen regardless of a 2.5 hour runtime.
Oh yeah.
I think they had a lot of building to do with 10 different characters. And I just really, really loved this movie. I was surprised at how much I loved it. I've been a big Captain Marvel fan on this podcast. I think this was better than Captain Marvel personally. I give it a 5 out of 6. Makari gave the best lines. The thing that Chloe Zhao did really well in this was she let Makari have the most powerful lines, and she told those using sign language. I thought that was a really bold choice. There was no villain in this. I really thought that was a bold choice. And I think it's bold of Marvel to introduce the Celestials and have a real dialogue about it, because the Celestials are kind of the end all be all of everything. So this is kind of, to me, the signaling of the MCU is going to be ending in the next 15 years, as far as I'm concerned. So 5 out of 6. I think this is a great movie. It opens a lot of doors. I really liked all these characters. If you checked out our TikTok page, I really liked Makari. I really liked Athena. And I obviously really liked Cersei and Icarus. And I thought the choice to make Icarus, and Mark, I'll let you talk about this too. The choice to make Icarus the bad guy was the most bold choice that I've seen in a long time for these
Bold that
kinds
you
of
could
movies.
see it.
Very
20 minutes
bold.
into it.
Say it again.
I knew 20 minutes into it he was going to be the bad guy, and it made me sad.
See, to me, I did not see it. It was not clear to me.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of thought that it was just a joke.
When they went back to that house in South Dakota, I was like, he's the only one that can fly. It makes sense.
Right. So for me, I didn't see it. Good for you, Mark. I'm proud of you, man. Good job. I didn't see it, and I really enjoyed it. I really, really thought it was a great plot twist, and yeah. So okay, here we go. Now we're good. All right, let's roll. Okay, so Mark, where do we leave off, Mark? Oh yes, the genitals. Yes. LJ, question for you then. So you talked about how this one drug. From your perspective, would this be a cutting issue, or would this be an issue of the whole story needs to be redone? They need to consider less Eternals, or they need to consider making this a 2-part movie. Or I've heard one piece of feedback that I've read online since watching it is this is a better suited for a TV show because you can give each individual character more time. Is that what you would have wanted when you heard and watched this movie?
I think what threw me off was the jumping back and forth between the flashbacks and the the modern times and stuff like that. Like it was just kind of like jarring because it's like, oh, okay, we're here now, and then we're here, and then it just the hopping back and forth is what kind of confused me. And then what especially confused me was the first scene that made me go, huh? Was the whenever Ajak, whenever they find her body, and I'm like, okay, like why are we just like, oh, we're here and she's on the ground all of a sudden, which obviously we learned later, but that was like the initial thing that kind of got it going for me. And then there were other times where I forgot, like, oh, there's still other Eternals they have to go get. And so that's where it kind of drug a little bit. Not too much. The thing that's messing me up too is like Dune is a recent example of pacing I enjoyed from a long movie. And I think that movie set a standard for me to where like that movie had some build up and then 2 hours of it went breakneck speed. And so like I understand that like that's a hard thing to balance in such a long movie. So it was the back and forth.
See, that's so interesting because for me, I felt Dune was so boring. And this is obviously not a Dune rating episode, but like I despised Dune, LJ. This is so funny to me because I give it like a 2 out of 6, maybe on a bad day, a 1 out of 6 for Dune. And so for me, I enjoyed the way that they went back and forth, and it worked for me because it felt like the transitions were smooth, because that's the big piece of it, right? Like you have to have a line or some form of a memory triggering going back and forth to make it work. Man, that's interesting because for me, Dune just isn't a narrative that worked, but for you it did. And I'm glad you brought that up, LJ, because for me, when we walked out of this, me and the kid I went with, as I referenced earlier, Dune was brought up by him he brought Dune up because he's
okay.
like, and we talked about it on the way there, actually, ironically too. And so Dune, to me, felt more political, whereas this one is clearly more of a humanity study. It's just a study on humanity.
Definitely.
And they're two different genres and how they're doing things, but the similarity is in the length and the quantity of story they're telling. And the pacing worked for me. So it's so fascinating for me to hear you guys say that it drug, because I do agree that it drug at certain parts, but the going back and forth for me actually gave me more character development. And maybe that's the reason I'm so attached to these characters now in a way that I wasn't anticipating going into it. Mark, from your perspective here, Chloe Zhao talked about how Final Fantasy really influenced her, and like Ancient Aliens and like, these science fiction movies and shows really referenced it for her. What did you think of Celestials, and what did you think of this concept being inserted into the MCU? I mean, this is one of the biggest concepts in comic books, and this is one of Jack Kirby's babies. What did you think of this?
Were you just talking about my thoughts on Celestials? Like that's what,
yeah.
Or like, okay. Well, I want to touch on your Chloe.
Maybe I'm asking more of MCU Celestials, because I do think that Celestials in comic books are a little more powerful than what this Celestials are.
What you said, like she took reference to like these other, properties or subjects. And it always makes me think when I hear, people who work on these comic book movies and shows, and you're like, well, why do you reference that stuff when there's a slew of comics you could have read and referenced? But I digress. I thought she did a good job, with these Celestials, making them pretty grand. But it made me, like, when I saw it in the movie, and I think this is the first Marvel movie where we had what do they call it? A crawl at the beginning of it.
Oh, yeah.
We had one of those.
Yeah.
And
kind
of explained the Celestials and what was going on, blah, blah, blah. And it made me think there that I remember seeing a list earlier this week, and I hope maybe I can go find it, that talked about the oldest living beings. And it was like, Celestials aren't the oldest living, and I don't remember what were, but it was like everything, like it started with the first one, and it's like, beginning of time. It's like then before time, then before our universe was created, before that universe was created, it just kept going down the list. So it's like, well, Celestials really aren't the most powerful thing. And what made me think, like, oh, what can defeat a Celestial? Maybe Galactus, who is older than Celestials. So can't wait for that to happen.
Yeah, that they definitely opened the door for Galactus to enter the picture more, didn't they?
That's what I really loved about this whole movie, especially the ending of this before like it goes to credits, where what's his name, the Celestial that they're working with, shows up, and you just see him like out in the distance. Initially, I thought it was going to be Galactus, but it made more sense, obviously, for the movie, that it was Iris or something, like, not Iris.
Are you talking about Tiamut, the one that died on Earth, or are you talking about the one they worked for?
The one that they worked for when he shows up.
Arifret?
Sure,
Arifet?
whatever. But yeah, I thought, yeah.
Overall, some very old name.
Overall, that's what thought they did a good job with that, and coming back to the 2.5 hour runtime, it's like they really did fit in as much as they could to give you as much context and believability, even though it might have felt like it dragged on. So there's that.
Yeah, this was such an undertaking for Chloe Zhao to try to introduce 10 characters at the same time, give them as much balance as you possibly can, attack the conversation of
and make you like
diversity,
care about some of the characters, and then they have them killed off.
Some of them.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. They did enough where it's like when some of the characters got killed, I'm like emotional. I'm like, no, I liked that one.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked Ajak. I really did like Ajak. I thought her heart for humanity was the strongest piece of. I thought Ajak's heart for humanity was the strongest of the characters towards humanity.
Yeah, it was kind of the saving grace of
no
the
doubt.
Eternals.
I think they all had love for humanity. Even Icarus. I think Icarus had love for humanity. I really do. And I think that's why his decision at the end to kind of betray the Eternals and allow Tiamut to rise from Earth was a difficult decision for him. But I mean, Gemma Chan is the heart and soul of this. And man, I got to tell you guys, as for me, when I heard that Kevin Feige was like, we got to bring back Gemma Chan from a literal non-existent, not important role in Captain Marvel. I don't even know what her character's name was in Captain Marvel.
It's been so long for me. I don't even remember.
And just like for him to go, we need to have you in it and you need to play Cersei. Cersei's the heart and soul of this movie. And I really, really like Gemma Chan in this. I thought she did an incredible job, way better than her portrayal in anything she did in Captain Marvel. And the love relationship with Icarus was so fascinating to me and so just earned. This was the most earned relationship in the whole movie. What did you guys think of the Icarus and Gemma Chan Cersei relationship? Mark, you talked about he didn't want the sex scene, but like aside from that, what would you add on that?
I mean, it definitely set up, what happens at the end. That event, yeah, obviously this dude loves her and is not going to kill her. As far as a relationship, like, would they say they were together, like, as a couple for 500 years or something like that?
It had been 500 years since they had broken up.
Okay.
I think they said centuries they'd been together.
Years.
They were together for like 4,000 or 5,000 years,
well,
but they'd been broken up for 500 years.
They came 5,000 BC, and he doesn't tell her he loves her until like 425 BC. So,
jeez.
So
talk about a long time to tell somebody you love them.
And that's where it made me think, like, I thought they said they were together 5,000 years when it was like the beginning of the movie when she talked about it, or when Black Knight, I think, made a reference. But then it's like, well, clearly they're only together for maybe 500 or 1,000 years. So that's why I thought that got convoluted. So, like, that's why I'd like to go back and watch it again and see if I just heard that wrong. But yeah, I mean, initially we're thinking we're going to get, or I thought we were going to get more Black Knight, but obviously that sets up to the end. But yeah, they really made us.
Yeah, I want to talk.
Were they going to fall back in love and stuff like that? But, they don't, right?
Yeah, let's save Black Knight discussion for the end when we talk about the post-credit stuff. LJ, what did you think of that relationship with Cersei and Icarus?
I liked it because we don't really have many examples of great relationships in the MCU, really. Like, the only one I can really think of is, like, Banner and Natasha, and it's just like that, and that's really not a great choice in my opinion either. But this was really cool. I thought that, like, yeah, they didn't necessarily need the sex scene, but I felt like it did show, like, okay, there was intimacy there. Also, for context, I knew very little about the Eternals coming into this movie. And I knew a little bit about the Celestials. So it's like all of this was
LJ, nobody did.
So I was
dude, like,
right.
you don't have to
Right.
I mean, you're not apologizing per se, but like, I think that's something that, like,
I come from a common
correct. And let's be frank, if anybody's telling you today, oh yeah, I was a big Eternals comic book reader, no, they weren't. They weren't, because everybody that I know that's into comics, I literally only know one person that,
like, the 70s and 80s, so, like,
totally,
they
like,
better be 40 plus if they're telling us.
Okay.
it's a very niche market. And I told Mark on last episode we were on, I only cared about the John Campea show perspective because the other individual, Michael is his name, who goes on that show, is a clear devout Jack Kirby fan. And that was the guy that I wanted to hear from. I didn't want to hear from anybody else because for me, I was like, I don't want to hear from your perspective. I want to hear from the person who actually would have read this comic book. And
right.
I just think that's something that, like, if anybody tells somebody right now that they're an Eternals fan, they're full of crap. Like, I don't believe it. I don't believe you, because it just has never had a big run. Now, will it have a big run moving forward?
Well,
I do believe
like
that is
Guardians
where
of
it's
the
headed
Galaxy,
now.
when they announced that, everyone's like, what? Who's
Yeah.
that? There's a raccoon? And,
Who?
Well, the Guardians of the
Yeah.
Galaxy, Mark, that at least had some form of legs. I at least was aware of the
I
Guardians
knew
of the
Rocket
Galaxy.
Raccoon
Okay.
from a video game.
I at least
Eternals had
knew
no
who they
legs.
were. No, Eternals had nothing. They
Apparently, they got generals too.
I just knew that Jack Kirby wrote it. That was all I knew, and I think it was a really bold choice. Let's talk about some of the other characters that are in this. Let's talk about Kingo. What did you guys think of Kumail Nanjiani's character as Kingo? Obviously, Kumail Nanjiani loses a ton of weight, becomes basically very built for
weight,
this
he
role.
gets Spelt and
That's what I'm saying, dude.
smoking.
Mm-hmm. I love how I read something about how they told him that he didn't need to go that hard.
And,
And I was like, that's
apparently
great.
He still like works out and eats healthy because he's like, I've just done this for so long. Now.
Right,
Like, I don't
right.
wanna quit.
Dude, his jawline
Yeah.
could break glass.
Dude, that dance scene, like when they first
Yeah,
dude.
see him like in the present day, I was just like, this dude's like, he's hot. He's hot now. He's hot.
He looked good. He looked great.
I'm gonna say it. I don't care. I'm married.
Mark, I will not say it.
Out of 6 I gave this movie, he garnered 3 of the 4. I thought this is what Marvel movies are all about, is having someone that has comic relief, and he presented that, I felt, through majority of the movie, and I thought he did a great job.
I love how
And
he
that
literally
too,
shoots
that's what-
finger
It
guns.
was like,
Yeah,
That's
his
his
ability is
ability.
finger guns. That's a great point. Thank you.
and he can Kamehameha blast you if he wants to. So, but these movies that have been coming out recently that have like energy like shots, I'm like, we need a live action Dragon Ball Z movie. But I digress. Let's move on.
Dude,
Yes.
that is a great point of how he was like able to build up his power levels to make huge strikes. That was so cool. And I liked how he was an actor and his side character who walked with them
I
and really
loved that. That was
represented.
such a great touch to have.
Great
his,
call.
His valet with him. Well, basically. The
Well,
whole
and
time.
that character represented humanity. The whole movie. The whole movie. He is speaking on behalf of humanity. And I really appreciated that.
His gratitude at one point too was just amazing. Like they were having a conflict, and he was just grateful that they were there to help the world. You know,
And I
thought
also
that was
think
cool.
that in a day and age where culture is such it's a hot topic item for specific people. I think this movie balances that well. It gives you cultural moments that are fresh, fulfilling, but also, and this is what's most important, they describe the character in which that character was enmeshed in. Whatever culture that character was enmeshed in, that culture is getting a spotlight.
Yep.
And I think that really worked well in its favor in this movie. And so the Bollywood scene in particular was just a huge win. And the description of Kingo's, he's been playing his great-great-grandfather and his great-grandfather. And I think that was just a brilliant way to talk about, like, how can you continue acting for centuries? Well, here's how. And I really, really liked that. And I liked his arc. I really liked his arc. I liked that he wasn't in the final fight. I really liked that.
Yeah.
I thought that was an earned moment. That's how that character rolled. And I agree, LJ. The fact that he did finger guns and pew pew, like I just think that's just so perfect for him.
That made it slightly funnier. Like, not that it was trying to be, but I was it was
Correct.
just a
I
nice
agree
touch.
completely. It was a nice touch, and it just works well for Kumail Nanjiani. Sprite, who can project lifelike images, played by Liam McHugh, had the 12-year-old body and frame. And this kind of presents itself in a challenge, and obviously at the end they make her human again. But that was the question I was wondering, was how are they going to end this with a 12-year-old? Like, how do you just recast new girls every time you do this, or like, what did you guys think of Sprite? Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know how I felt about Sprite because it's just like I get what their ability was, but in like the grand scheme, it's like, did we like? I think they're planning something more down the line to obviously not have Sprite killed and turn them human, obviously, so they can grow older. To like, does Sprite eventually get their power back, or what? What's gonna happen? So.
Right.
But then, you get the whole, like, you needed, at the end, some betrayal on top of just Icarus, because Sprite is, you find out and might know before, everyone else finds out that Sprite is, like, in love with Icarus, and,
Dude, that blew my mind when she went with him at the end.
It's very human.
Yeah.
It's a very human emotion, and I really like that about Sprite.
That's what
I really
Marvel's
like
all
Sprite a
about.
lot.
Gods wanting to be like humans, and humans wanting to be like gods. That's what Marvel's always been about. So
Yeah, I thought
makes
she
sense.
did a great job, and I'm looking forward to watching that character grow. I think that was a really smart touch to keep the same actress growing through the future. Let's talk about Lauren Ridloff.
If, Cersei, gets her hands on another Celestial, she can empower Sprite back again, or make Black Knight into a giraffe, and then they'll do some weird stuff there. So, and then we'll get our first scene of that in a Marvel movie. You think?
Sure,
Down
yeah.
the road.
I'm looking forward to the
and that's
Black
what
Knight,
ends the
the
15
Black
years.
Knight being a draft.
And that's what ends the 15 years in MCU, and it restarts like a flashpoint, and then we start a new Marvel universe. There you go.
Did
be
we
in
like
their 40s.
Druig, Barry Keoghan. This was great too because this is like a true Scottish actor too.
Yep.
So his accent was just really like dense and
Like I couldn't tell if it was Irish, Scottish, or Welsh. Like it just confused
Yeah.
me. Like it was such a.
I liked
it. Was
it.
Probably such a niche, or very sect, like accent in wherever he's from. That's what I felt. I loved it.
yeah, I loved it. I thought
Yeah.
he was great. I really liked his power set, and I loved the scene where Druig is discussing with the other Eternals how he could control the whole planet and how he's just frustrated with how they make decisions, and he loves humanity. Like the whole movie is setting you up to think this guy's going to become the villain.
That's what I was gonna say. Like I would expect him to join
That was-
Icarus,
He
but
doesn't.
he doesn't.
He loves humanity despite the fact that he can control them.
When we saw him leave and then all split
Yeah.
up, I'm like, when we come back to him, he's gonna have a cult, and that's kind of what he had. That's,
Totally.
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, I really, really, really liked this character. And this is, Mark, we talked about this last week on our episode. When somebody zigs when we're expecting a zag, that's exciting. This is what that character was. He said what everybody else in the room thought. He did not fall into what the cookie cutter mold is of what, the mental manipulation characters are. And ultimately, I think Barry Keoghan really crushed his portrayal of love for humanity. I think every character loved humanity in some regard. It's the reason they stayed. And
Yeah.
I just really was moved by his performance. It's a big, for me, if you're listening, a huge part of this movie for me was how they portrayed their love for humanity. I really think I think all 10 crushed that. And the dilemma of making the choice to allow Tiamat, to emerge or not was such a real difficult decision for them. And I really, really loved that tension. Don Lee as Gilgamesh, the strongest Eternal, how he boxed. His power set was so stinking cool. I loved this guy. He was great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, LJ.
He's my favorite. He's my favorite out of the bunch. And then we'll talk about Thena later. But I really liked where they put him and Thena. But yeah, I loved his power set, and he was just a fun.
Did you want him to fall in love with Thena?
No, I don't. They didn't. I'm glad they didn't do that because they didn't need to. It was very much a almost like a sibling love or just like a genuine love, not like a I have feelings for you love. That's. I really loved that about Gilgamesh.
I do. Mark, any other thoughts on Gilgamesh?
Second favorite character. That's how I felt. Also agree with you
Wow.
on his moveset. I thought was pretty sweet too. And one of the Eternals that gets whacked out and makes me very sad. But I knew that was going to happen.
Well, right, and you got to kind of transition to Thena right after that because he makes the choice to protect her. And so Thena's tricky because there's a couple pieces of her character that are interesting. One, her skill set is creating weapons, which is just such an OP skill set. And she's essentially the greatest fighter ever. But it looks like it's dance. It doesn't look like it's a fight. So I would assume we all enjoyed Angelina Jolie, but did we buy, because this was for me one of the things that I struggled with. Did we buy that her brain was recalibrating itself from all the times that they had been on planets? And obviously, a huge spoiler, we've already talked about it, but how they would birth different Celestials and how she essentially was reliving those things and fighting those characters. Like, did we buy that plot angle, or was that just too much?
I believe that it was a way of them to not need to spend as much time with that character, because
Okay.
I would have loved to spend more time with it, because she seemed like a very important like character as far as like who she was like to the world, and where her like where the Greek influence came from and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it was just a way of putting her kind of in the back seat,
Which was that's really shocking, giving Angelina Jolie is
I
that
thought it was
actress.
the
perfect
That's
role.
really shocking.
For I loved her in this role, and I did buy it because there was a point, I think it might have been around like when they made up some disease for her, and I had to remember, it's like, well, Mark, you gotta stop basing this as like it's a real movie, like based on reality. It's a comic book movie, so it's gonna follow comic book tropes, and some things are just gonna be what they are, and nothing more is gonna be explained about it, and you just gotta suspend disbelief sometimes.
I'm with you there. So I want to talk about Fastos, a couple different things here. So another piece of trivia is, Fastos.
Was it Fastos or Fastus?
Fastus?
I don't.
Am I wrong on that?
I mean, I'm not trying to correct you, but I can't remember, even though I just saw it.
Well, I think you are trying to correct me, Mark. I think you just need to.
I think it's
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Fastos, because
There
the
you go.
name comes from
Yeah.
Hephaestus.
So Mark, if you're gonna correct me, just step up and correct me.
Oh wait, well I don't like stepping on your shoes because you're a very sensitive person, and then I had to hear about it like 3 days later.
Oh, now we're okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well,
Podcast over. Max,
End of
Max
episode.
left. 3 days later, we record.
I love that it's 3 days later.
Well,
I need a full 72 hours
you always do.
to get over the fact that you frustrated me. I really liked Fastos, and I'm not even going to talk about his power set. I one piece of criticism that some reviewers of this movie are giving is that that Marvel is using big events in human history to create pathos for specific characters, and for this character, he goes to Hiroshima and the nuclear bombing, and this is the moment in time where he makes his kind of decision that he really is not as for humanity as the rest of the Eternals are. And from that point on, he makes the decision to go live another life. Obviously, he's also the first gay superhero in the MCU depicted. For me, I've been telling people that Hiroshima scene is one of the most powerful scenes in the whole movie. I really
agree.
loved Brian Tyree Henry's performance. He's Paperboy in Atlanta as well, if you're familiar with that show. I think he's just a tremendous actor. And I really, really loved this character. He for me, this is you guys have spoken high of Gilgamesh. This is my Gilgamesh. I think Fastos really just crushed this role. I really loved him in this. I loved his balance of humor, but also being serious. I love how he was able to hold down Icarus using his technology. I like his intelligence, but also his charm. I liked his relationship with his son. I think that was a really fun thing to watch, and I really cannot wait to watch this character in the future. And I loved just how he'd use weapons, like how when they're fighting Icarus at the end and he's like using blasters. I thought that was just so cool.
Yeah, and then how he like chains him up from the things he's already like launched
Dude,
out there.
it
That
was
so
just
cool.
he was great, and like just top to bottom, and like
Wasn't that very
people
like
were-
the group fighting Thanos on Titan when they tried
Yes.
to strap him down? That was that vibe, that fight vibe against Icarus.
So yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And honestly, him being gay was a huge piece, and obviously for like China, they're not showing this movie because of that scene, or they're cutting these scenes. And it wasn't a huge issue for me in the context of like it wasn't overwhelming for the story. I thought it was very fitting well to the subject of what needed to get talked about. And yeah, was it different than most heroes? Sure, but like it didn't. It was no different in the context of that character than him getting married to a woman and having a kid.
So I'm not going to say these people walked out because of this, but it was odd timing if they left because of this. When that kiss happened, two people got up that were like 2 rows in front of me and like left. I don't know if they like had a thing going on or that was the reason. So I don't want to, say rural Minnesota is anti, gay or whatever, but that did happen. But there was like 50 people in the audience too, so they could have left for some other reason. But I just thought it very, very coincidental if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, if you're not going to this movie because of that, then you should have done your research ahead of time. Is kind of
yeah, the timing of that seems
like
oddly
that
specific.
Yeah, that sounds very specific.
And it's like a passionate kiss, like you would have with a loved one.
Yeah.
So
yeah, my loved one is going to die potentially.
Yeah. So there are people in this world that don't like that stuff, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming from a background of faith, specifically for me, like I enjoyed how it didn't feel like pandering. Like
completely
there's
agree.
a lot of stuff. Yeah, like it and I enjoyed that about it. It just it's a thing in our world, and that's their lifestyle. More recently, I've enjoyed how like there have been other shows that and other things that don't pander with it. Like Brooklyn Nine-Nine is another example to me. Like there's a gay couple in that, and it just feels like they're normal people. Like you don't have to blow it out of proportion or make it such a big deal, and it can just be normal. And I appreciated that.
I did too. I really did want them to beat it over the head, and honestly, like how much they marketed about it beat it over the head more than the actual movie. And that was so that whole scene was not nearly as bad as whatever. Salma Hayek is Ajak. I talked about this at the beginning. I really loved how Salma Hayek portrays this character. This is a gender bend of the original character Ajak, and how she just leads so well. I will say, Mark, one of the thoughts I had going to Internals was that Ajak was going to be the bad guy because Ajak has the direct access to the Celestials, and so I thought that she was going to be lying about what the Celestials were doing, and I really, really liked that it ended up she was just the heart and soul of this.
Another zigzag moment.
She was the matriarch of this, and that made her femininity, maybe is the word I'm looking for, so much more powerful in this, and it just made her so valuable to the team, and she is the rallying point. And similar to Coulson in the original Avengers movie, but in a much more nurturing and loving way. And Selma Hayek didn't have a lot of like role in this movie in terms of spoken lines, but her presence is felt in this, and it's like the fairy godmother. I don't know. It's just I really liked Ajak. Mark, what'd you think of Ajak?
I could probably just say exactly what you said. I would piggyback right on that. It's like, yeah, she was.
Oh, come on, get on my back. Let's go.
Would like that. Very much like going into this, I thought her character was going to be the villain, but that really wasn't the case in this movie. And very much like the mother to like these 9, and I'm pretty sure like I would that would be an extra scene I actually would like to see, is like her in South Dakota, like sad that she's not with her family anymore, like basically her family, and that's very much. She was the humanity of the whole group and did care and was planning before she got killed to find a way to stop what'd they call it? What was the event called again?
Oh, the emergence
from happening. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, like the scene with her and Icarus, how she did not have any frustration and anger, and how her immediate reaction was just like, oh, I led you down the wrong path. I'm so sorry. Yep. Just like, you referenced it earlier, LJ, but for me, in my perspective of my faith, I was just like, that is grace. That
It's an unconditional.
exactly. That is like
thing.
parenthood. That is just what that is.
Yeah.
And I thought, and normally Selma Hayek is put in these roles where she is more of a sex icon, is maybe the way I'd put it. And I thought this was just such a refreshing role for her. And with the limited time she was on screen, she executed every time she was. And that Icarus scene at the end where he throws her to the deviants was just so powerful to me. And a huge piece of that is because of her. It's because of her performance. And so, yeah, I really loved it. Any thoughts on Ajak for you, LJ?
She was one of the characters that I feel like I would have liked to have had more time with her, but also the timing for her death, I think, had to happen for the plot to move on. But also, like, I was kind of disappointed that, like, they didn't show, like, what happened, because I'm like, oh, like, this really important character is just, like, dead all of a sudden. But then it made it more impactful for me later, because then I'm like, oh, okay, that's how it happened. That's why they didn't show it at first. But the transition to South Dakota was jarring at first, but then, like, I like how they did end up making sense out of it later. But I would have liked to see more of her, but also the limited time we had with her was very purposeful.
I loved Makari. I said it on the front end of the show. I think this is the best speedster in the MCU. This is my biggest hot take from this movie. I think she's a must. This is the best Eternal to me. Every single big line in this movie, the biggest line at the end was "The truth will set you free," comes from the hands of Lauren Ridloff playing Makari as a deaf super speedster. This is how you do a speedster, Mark. Mark, in the next Flash movie, my expectation is Makari is the bar.
Wait, what makes it the bar?
I really am holding.
Go
ahead,
what makes it the bar? Like, I just want to know.
I think what makes Makari the bar for me is we didn't just see speed, we saw her fighting Icarus. And her fight scene with Icarus was head and shoulders to me the best fight scene, choreographed scene in the whole movie. She's charming like Barry Allen was in the Batman vs. Superman universe.
Let me stop right there. So what you want is better choreographed speedsters. That's what you want. So yes, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, I'm so far through every movie I've seen, she's the best speedster.
And my question, the thing I would love to know about where speed comes from, it would have to be from where, like, you know, in Flash uses the Speed Force. I forget what Quicksilver used, but like hers has speed, space, and time basically through whatever the Celestial gave her. Because so like basically she's moving space and time through herself to get where she needs to be, in a sense.
Yeah, how does that celestial energy work through her? That's a great question, Mark. That would be fun to explore in the next movie. That'd be really fun to explore.
Yeah, because you can kind of tell where the energy comes from in a lot of the other characters, but her, it's very unique.
I loved her. Couldn't speak more highly of her. This was the biggest surprise in the whole movie. I really was downplaying the fact that she was deaf, but it really was a strength for the character. They really did lean into the fact that she was speaking in sign language, and it was great.
The most hard-hitting scene is when she yells with her voice.
Yes.
Oh, that just like, I got chills right now. Just thinking about that. Like, that's how, like, intense that scene felt to me, so. Oh.
It hurt me to hear that. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. LJ, thoughts on Makari?
Again, another character I feel like we didn't get much more time with. But I think killing off some of the characters is going to do well for some of these characters that are sticking around, because we see her in the ship and she's just like, oh, well, I guess I'm done being bored, you know, like I'm, which I really loved about that.
One
scene.
thing I will say, LJ, did you think it was weird that when she's sitting on the ship, she's listening to classical music?
Oh yeah, she's like behind the times, because there's the jokes about like, you don't even know what an iPad is.
She's deaf.
Yeah, or a DVD player. Yeah.
But she can read. But she made the comment earlier where the guy tried to steal something from her, and she said she can hear vibrations and the voice.
Oh, that's fair.
So
okay.
just like Beethoven could technically still hear the vibrations of the music he composed. Same concept.
That makes sense.
All right.
Could be.
She's not. I mean, she's
okay.
sound, but
all right, you're right, Mark.
Still be able to, her other senses would be heightened in a sense.
Mark, you want me to say you're right?
Yes,
here you go.
I'm right.
You're right.
You love me for once.
I love you. You're right.
History in the making right here. But the last question I think I have for her is like, so like, was she in charge of like watching the ship and making sure nothing happened to it, because like it just kind of sat there for so many years?
I'm gonna say
they never said,
yes.
I guess.
I think part of her just, some people prefer to be hermits and stay in a safe spot. That's how I interpreted that character.
Safe.
Yeah, that's true, especially for, somebody, with her disabilities and stuff too. Like, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Let's talk about a couple other things of this. I mean, we've encompassed a lot by just speaking on the characters. We've encompassed a lot. Let's talk about the Icarus betrayal. I talked about it. Did you appreciate that story arc for Icarus? Did you feel like that was earned? Mark, you had talked offline with me about how you kind of saw this coming. Were you cool with the Icarus storyline? Obviously, he is the main Eternal when you look at the comic books.
And that's what, he's basically he's going to be, up to this point, Marvel's Superman, even though Superman gets a good reference in this, I find odd. And Batman.
And
Robin,
Batman, right?
Too.
That's so weird. Like, I wonder what was up with that.
Okayed by Daddy Feige. But yeah, that, going into this, I was like, okay, we're going to get our Superman. He'll be a part of the Avengers. And then, like, once we get back to South Dakota, I'm like, this dude's the bad guy. He's going to be the bad guy. And I'm not going to get him for the rest of these movies. And, that's how I felt. I wanted him to stick around. But the arc of his character in this movie, I thought played out well. So.
LJ, what about you?
Indeed.
I really liked the switch. I loved how like they kind of looked at him as the leader, and he's like, well, no, I'm not. And at first it seemed from a very humble angle, like, no, she, Cersei's chosen. But then that's when we figure out, oh, it's not that he's humble about it. It's just that he's keeping secrets. I loved the switch, and he was such a powerful foe that you needed multiples to take him down. It wasn't anything that one of them would have been able to handle. What made it even more, like, what made the arc even more perfect was his exit, how he just straight up flew into the sun. I was like, wow, like, it was an epic exit, I think, an epic way to go. Like, that the most I've seen in any movie. Yeah.
He's not dead.
He's not dead
I don't
all.
think he's dead.
And he better not be dead. Otherwise, I'm going to be even more upset. Because I was like, really? You're just going to have a dude commit suicide on, like, another first for Marvel? Like,
I agree.
The whole
he's not dead.
For all the firsts you want to do, Daddy Feige, and just,
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. That was an homage to his Greek mythology character.
Yeah.
Who flies too close to the sun.
Beyonder. He becomes a Beyonder because of that.
Dude, that is a very, very, very real possibility, Mark. I really think that.
If I'm remembering my Beyonder lore correctly, isn't there some versions of the Beyonder where the Beyonder doesn't have like a true origin or whatever?
Correct.
So really, it could be anything in any certain cosmic situation.
I totally foresee that. I totally foresee that being something.
That'd be awesome.
Another actor, even though they killed two bigger actresses like Salma Hayek and Angelina Jolie. But I just feel like you don't cast, what's his first name, Madden, in this and not have him for more movies. So.
Yeah, that was wild that they killed Salma Hayek right out the gate. That was wild.
She will not be joining us for the rest of this journey in present day.
No, she will not. Mark, you and I talked last week about how we thought Olympus was going to have a bigger issue. To me, the biggest plot twist for this was that they weren't from Olympus.
Right? Like, and was Olympus, and the planet they said they're from, Olympia, wasn't a real planet, so.
Right.
So it makes me think, like, are they going to bring in Greek or Roman gods into this story? They're going to bring Zeus in, technically, so.
I think they will. I think it's just going to come from Thor.
Yeah, so it's not going to be from Eternals, which I thought would make more of a sense, but it is what it is.
Right. Yeah.
I'm along for the ride.
No, I'm with you. LJ, were you having an expectation of these characters showing up, or you're like, whatever, don't really need them?
I'm not as familiar with like the pantheon in like Marvel universe and how that's handled. Like even in the comics, I figure if Thor is a thing and they explore his extraterrestrialness, like yeah, they are going to have to touch on it at least. I didn't expect much from it, and if I don't think they're gonna get too deep into it in the MCU.
Let me see what else I've got before we kind of get into the really juicy stuff. Okay, I think we can. I think we covered most of it. Mark, let's talk about the post-credit scenes. Well, actually, no. I'm gonna pause real
I
quick.
want to talk about one thing. And,
You might be talking about what I want to talk about. Go ahead.
gosh, when the Celestial, I cannot remember his name, was
Tiamat.
there you go, was talking to Cersei about like what they're all about, and just
Oh, I'm sorry. That was Tiamat's the one that was
the
supposed
one
to come
that
out of
they're
Earth.
working for.
Yeah.
And he's talking
Yeah.
about what the whole grand scheme of what they do, and they were on a
Arishem.
yeah
Arishem. That's his
they
name.
were on a planet, and like some of the deviant creatures, and I can't remember the name of the creature, looked just like from Attack of the Clones.
Ko.
The one with
His name was Ko.
the ones with like the like slicer hands, like the.
Yes.
And there was a planet that looked like Fluisha.
Oh, yeah.
What was it called? Felucia. There you go.
Felucia.
And kind of had the like I thought the people looked just like the Fluicians, so I'm thinking like did they just backdoor Star Wars in the Marvel universe? Because technically it could be from a different planet and universe.
Well, and Marvel does
own.
own the Star Wars comic book
But
rights.
they also had a Star Wars comic book when they were at the Builder's house. I'm just blinking.
Right.
So,
Yes.
they're being pretty meta with all this stuff. So, but
Yeah,
that's
they
what I wanted to talk about. Like that's why I want to go back and just see if I see
Arishem-
that better.
Like
And it
Yeah.
pans out.
like
Yeah,
Mustafar
that
and What
too.
If,
That- They
like
said, there's that.
Yeah, let's. You know what, Mark? It is something we should talk about. Let's talk about the Celestials. This is such a huge deal that they have Celestials in this.
And we got a little bit of
And to
Celestials
me-
in Guardians of the Galaxy with dead ones. And
Right, but we haven't gotten like full tilt Celestials that are alive
yes,
right now.
Like, because we're
And-
supposed to presume
and-
that they were dead up until.
Correct. And Arishem approached Earth. So the two big things that happen in this that like basically every character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe saw two things. They saw Tiamat come out of the water,
Yep.
and they saw Arishem approach Earth and pull three people off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone and their mom saw Arishem. Everybody. You can't avoid that
And
one.
it's behind the asteroid belt too. It's like that's how far away he was
Yeah.
and how big he looked.
That's how big he
Yeah.
is.
the
There's
scale. was
no
awesome
way
when
that
they
the
showed him.
Avengers can beat him.
Yeah, they would need someone
Like-
of cosmic powers.
They're going to need, and this is where the post-credit scene kicks in. They're going to need the Infinity Watch. They're going to need Doctor Strange. They're going to need these potential other characters. Obviously
Characters from other
in
multiverses
Guardians of
too.
right in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, we're gonna get Adam Warlock.
Adam
Thank
Warlock?
you. We're gonna get these characters
your
that can
comic book
fight
stuff,
these kinds of characters.
Adam Warlock is basically the one who gets everyone together for the
Adam Warlock is a
yeah.
huge deal.
Like they
Is a
basically
very huge deal.
replaced what Hulk does, with warning everybody, because like in the comic, it's
With him.
Warlock who does that. So
Right.
yeah. Anyways.
Yeah,
I've been waiting
I
for
was
it.
just LJ, that's a great way that was an eloquent way to put it. The scale of the Celestials was just remarkable. And the fact that the Eternals really thought like we're gonna go against the Celestials totally made sense why Kingo made the choice he did. He's like, I'm not doing that. I really respected that from him. I really did. I was like, oh, you know what? I get it. I get why you're doing this. I get why you are holding back from going against that. That's a very, very big threat. And it's basically, aside from Kang, probably
And-
the biggest threat out
and
there.
he was full, and I think all of them were fully aware that Celestials are super powerful. So like, there's really nothing they could really do, but we're gonna do. I mean, the ones that were still alive, we're gonna do what they could to help stop the Celestial from emerging. So
Yeah, we're totally going to get at some point a conflict with the Celestials, and how they do that is going to be wild.
Yeah, not to derail anything, but from my lack of knowledge, is so I feel like we touched on it earlier. What's stronger, Galactus or the
I mean, that could be
Celestials?
up for debate. I mean, you could say Celestial is the stronger
Okay.
one, but Galactus is a consumer of worlds and is outside our
Okay.
current known, or the MCU's current known universe, who got cosmic celestial powers from when the other universe died and transferred over. So in a sense,
Okay.
if he can eat worlds and is also supposed to be this massive being,
Well, and he's
You know.
he's a remnant from another
no,
universe.
he's not just another universe, like another, like the whole grand, like this,
Multiverse.
Well, what is it? Okay,
is what I'm saying.
if I'm remembering my Galactus lore right,
Because he's not a Celestial.
He's
He's
not.
technically not
but,
a Celestial.
But the universe he was
Right,
in
right.
was died.
Right.
For some reason, he got this cosmic energy, and then our universe was born, Big Bang, whatever, created, and then he now exists and has gone, has existed as long as time's been going on in this universe.
So he transcends.
But then there's other
universes.
things that
Okay.
transcend him too. That's where, like, going back to earlier, I mentioned that there's a list out there that talks about the oldest beings in the Marvel universe.
Right. That's what I was thinking of, because like I wonder if we talk about this big celestial conflict. I
go back
wonder
to-
if that's where
Yep.
Fantastic Four is going
Yes.
to come into it, and maybe where Galactus comes into it somehow.
And I
Like
think it's-
that's going to be huge if we get to see that on screen.
Also, the Beyonder can also be tied to being even older than Galactus too. So, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a comic book, so like you could literally, whatever the origin or the sex
Right.
or gender of the character, you can switch and make up whatever you want and tell that story. And so, like, I'm all for that. It's like, so like whatever is currently out there in the comic book lore, they can change to fit this story because they do that in comic books with these characters every few years. So
Well, and
Right.
and you could even have Galactus fight on behalf of them against the Celestials, or vice versa. The Celestials fight Galactus.
That-
I think it's more likely that the Celestials fight Galactus and Galactus kills the Celestials, and
yeah,
That's
Yeah.
what I'm thinking. I
and
want to
that
see
is
that on
how
screen.
we get this huge conflict. The Celestials then approach the Eternals, and then the Eternals approach the Avengers, and that's how everybody gets together. And then once that conflict's done, then you do have something like the Beyonder Mark. Then you do have something like the multiverse with Kang step in and go, all right, it's Battle World time, and I just, yeah, it's wild, but it's like
ooh wee.
this. I know this is we are way into the comic book weeds on this. Like,
However,
I've successfully derailed.
this is
with
some
all
wild
that stuff
stuff.
going on, do they really make it that grand though? Because that might
Yes,
be over the head
100%.
for the normies.
They can.
that just go see these movies.
No,
You
no,
don't
no,
think
no, no,
so?
no. It won't, because if you
Are
have
we now in a
no,
world
it won't
where,
be.
where majority is smarting up to this stuff to a point. Like you just.
I think as long as
slowly
everybody
spoon
is
feed this stuff into our mouths, we'll eventually just eat it all and love it. But if you just like shoveled it in, we'd
No,
be like,
they
"Enough,
have to
enough."
they have to unite, Mark.
No,
That's
I'm
the
not
game
saying
plan. They
I'm
have
not
to
saying
unite
they don't-
everybody. It doesn't matter
not
past
gonna
that what you do.
Unite, but just like Celestials fighting Galactus fighting the Avengers and Eternals, like there's and then the Beyonder might be coming in here with Battle World.
You need the
And then there's
Eternals
Secret
to fight
Wars,
a Celestial
and then
or a
there could be Secret
Galactus.
Invasion. And then there could be another Secret Invasion and another Secret War, and then
Another Civil War.
War, and then another Infinity War happens.
All right, Mark, we got to move on.
I'm so winded right
closing
now.
out. We're past an hour right now. Dane Whitman, obviously, Black Knight. He's Kit Harington, a huge disappointment for me. And I haven't said this in any of my review, but this is a disappointment to me. His limited screen time was
Yes,
disappointing.
I
to
wanted
me.
more. I wanted a little bit of Black Knight, more than what we got.
I did too. I think it's ridiculous.
He was a
I think-
casualty of the 10 we already
I think
had.
it is absolutely foolish that we didn't get to see him in Black Knight. I hate it.
Yeah.
It was one of the huge poor errors on their call. Post credit scene, we talked about at the beginning. We get Harry Styles playing Eros, aka Star Fox, and then we get Pip played by
Patton Oswalt.
Patton Oswalt, Mark, this was surprising. I'm so pumped that Patton Oswalt's playing
That's
him.
so good.
I knew he'd eventually find his way back into the Marvel Universe for the third time. So
Well, in the way, and I like that they're setting up the Infinity Watch. This
Yep.
is a great way for anybody from the Guardians of the Galaxy can
I
step off
initially
now
thought
and have a spot to go.
when it was that rainbow color, I was like, is Thor showing up? Are we gonna get Thor just showing up in their spaceship? But yeah, glad
That
we got
would've
him in
been-
the
well,
Starbucks.
I had to look up Arrows, and I'm.
Well,
pumped
fortunately
that
for
now.
you, Mark, you hadn't had that scene spoiled 3 weeks ago.
Which is surprising 'cause
just
you-
by
you-
surfing the net.
Well, you do that to yourself. You like to be informed.
No, on that, no, Mark, on
That
that
was
one,
truly
that
spoiled?
was just like it was truly
I'm just
spoiled.
surprised because I actually enjoy Harry Styles' music.
The worst
and I
kept
didn't,
secret.
Like, run into that with what would just pop up.
Dude, these Harry Styles girls have been spoiling that crap for weeks. It's like it's bananas. It's absolutely banana. It's like the most like any Marvel fan that's been waiting to watch this movie, and if you didn't know that Harry Styles was in this, I tip my hat to you. Because you must not be on your phone.
Well,
Because it's been
I've
everywhere.
been staying away because I haven't seen Venom 2, and I know there's 2 end credit scenes I heard were pretty juicy. So like I do my best to stay away from this stuff.
I know what the end credit scene for Venom
See, and I
is.
don't want to know until I see it.
You need, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's a different topic for another day. We're not going to talk about that around Mark. So we get that scene. You're welcome, Mark. And then we obviously get the scene where Dane Whitman is trying to use the sword because Cersei is taken from him. So he feels an imminent threat, needs to go. As he's reaching for the sword appears to be reaching back in some way with an organism attached to it. And then we hear an off-screen voice that Chloe Zhao today, November 5th, has confirmed is Mahershala Ali. Holy crap, guys.
I thought it was him. That was his voice. And then when I went online, I was like, oh, yep, it's Blade. So
Yeah, I need to watch that scene again because I wasn't sure what was going on at first. But the more like we talk about it, I'm just like, okay, it makes.
I have
total
no
sense
idea
now.
why they didn't just have him in the scene.
because they like to tease us, Max.
Yeah.
Like you want more.
I wonder if it was a filming thing. He just couldn't be there.
It could be COVID, all that jazz, or he was busy.
That's true. That's a good point too. Mahershala Ali that just would have made a big deal to have him in the room, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think everybody's been. This is like the first nugget of like Blade's inclusion to the MCU now. So I think we're just gonna get more of it, and we're gonna be
Who would have
waiting.
thought 20
Yeah,
years
this is
ago
great.
that, hey, we're going to do another run of Marvel movies and Blade's going to be a part of it?
And Blade's going to be a cornerstone.
Yeah,
Do you
Yeah,
think,
it's
hear me
pretty
out,
crazy.
hear me out. When Deadpool eventually
Go on.
arrives into the MCU, does Deadpool make a reference to once knowing someone that looked like Blade?
100%.
Thank you. Like they gotta do
Oh, yeah.
stuff like that because that's what we
No,
love.
Deadpool
has to do
Deadpool
stuff
will
like
be
that.
the human MCU encyclopedia of everything that came before.
Yep.
That's his job.
'Cause-
His job is to make the audience remember the crap that we had
Because
before.
if they do stuff
so we appreciate
where
what comes.
some universes get folded into other ones, like he would be one that might remember what the X-Men were.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, great episode today, guys. You can check out Eternals right now. It is in theaters, so make sure you go check that out. It's not on Disney Plus, but when it comes out, make sure you watch that here in a couple weeks. LJ, thanks so much for coming by, man. And we had some technical difficulties this episode, so thanks for sticking with us, man.
no problem, man. I'm happy to be a part of it and honored to
Just
be here
consider
this week.
yourself part of the extended Infinity Bros universe, LJ. You're part of it.
Right on. I do guest articles.
Well, that's
on
what I was
the
gonna
website
say.
Also,
Yeah,
so-
you just stole my thunder. You can read more about LJ
Sorry.
on the Infinity Snap, on the Daily Snap. Excuse me, Isaac's gonna kill me. On the Daily Snap on our website, theinfinitybros.com. Just check the link in our show notes. You also can find out more about Geeks Under Grace, which LJ is on staff for, and you can check out LJ on Twitter. Just scroll down in the show notes. I talked about it at the beginning of the show, but check that out. Support LJ, follow him, support him. He's the man. Mark, I thought you were okay
I
tonight.
thought I was okay as well. Just glad you let me be here, and when we had these difficulties, you didn't kick me out of the room.
I thought about
You
it.
did. I am pumped to see this movie again with my beautiful wife Kelly. Got to make that plug, and thank you again. And thanks, LJ, for
Yeah, I'm
sticking
really
with us.
looking forward to seeing this movie with Sarah next week. I agree. I think this is one thing about this movie that I really like is that it is a movie that will be better, I think, with multiple viewings.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. So cool. Well, thank you, Infinity Bros Universe, wherever you listened, however you listened. Thanks for making us part of your podcast experience. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Discord, and Twitch at the Infinity Bros. As always, we'll love you guys 3000. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Infinity Bros podcast. You can find the Infinity Bros on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Infinity Bros. Feel free to send listener feedback via email at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com.